Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I have the opportunity to work on a big old ugly reel. This one is a Sportfisher 6100 from probably the 1970s. It was made in Korea, and that might say around 75, 76. A lot of Japanese production went over to Korea in and around that time frame. And this one wound up being a gift to a fellow, and he said, well, you know what, it's kind of ugly, but if you can make this work for me, it's big enough to handle some striped bass and bluefish. I've got a heavy rod I'd like to latch it onto, and if you could just do me a favor, clean it up, that would work wonderfully for me. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts as we show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and how to get it out there fishing again. I think this is probably going to be an example. I'll have to see if I can work it into my schedule of how to repaint a really bad reel. And I'm thinking only of repainting the rotor. We'll see. Right now we want to get it working and servicing it completely. And then, well, if I get a chance, I'll do a video on cleaning up the bowl and servicing it as well. So I start by removing the exterior pieces and parts. We'll start with that star adjuster there. You can see the reel hasn't been serviced in a very long time. It's all dirty and greasy and grimy at the top here, and that happens because, well, it's a top drag reel. As you're fishing, the line's winding in, coming over the top of this and throwing a lot of the water and the debris that line is carrying right onto that bowl, and then it slides right down into here and gums up the drag washers. So it's one of those reasons why reels should be serviced on a regular basis. While I'm doing this, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, please use the notification button. That notification button will help you to know and see when I'm posting my videos, and, well, then you'll be able to make a determination as to whether you want to see that video or not. Well, I'm just looking here. This is the setup on the springs. You'd want to know this in case you have one of these. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures, because before you start disassembling things, you want to make sure that you can see where things are in case something kind of goes bump in the night. We have a spring that starts on the bottom of the bowl here, comes around, wraps through the screw, and then has a hook on the back of it that grabs the trip arm on this side. And, well, when I was working on it, it's working. Looks like maybe that slipped out from underneath the screw, and that's okay. But I guess we could loosen that screw and move that back a little bit. Right now it's working, so maybe leaving good enough alone is okay. Once we do that, we're going to take our handle off. The handle should come off in a counterclockwise manner. And as I take these big pieces and parts off, well, I just kind of lay them up on the top of my bench here because I'm not going to lose those. But as I take the smaller ones off, I'm going to use a parts tray. The parts tray is a piece of fast food container, and that's there to help me keep track of all the little stuff that could get knocked off my bench and the like. Just looking, that's a rivet. Whenever I do these types of reels, I want to make sure that I put the anti-reverse in the off position. That's because there's usually a geared ratchet on the back end of the main gear, and if you leave that engaged and you go to remove that main gear, sometimes you're going to knock the anti-reverse dog and spring out of position. And if you don't know the reel, well, it's always fun to try and figure out how the engineers put it together initially. So I'm going to be surprised, I think, when I open this up, see what we got underneath here. This could have 1, 2, or 3 ball bearings. I guess it all depends. I think the Sportfisher model was a store brand for Kmart, but I could be wrong. I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on that too. I've taken the 3 side plate screws off. I've put them into my parts tray, and I made a note that all 3 side plate screws are the same, so that doesn't matter too much where you put them when it's time to put them back together again. Relatively simple design here. We have a crosswind block that's screwed onto the axle shaft. We have a big gear that's driving the pinion gear, and that's what makes the world go round. So I haven't seen any ball bearings on the lower end of this reel. The next step would be to remove the 2 screws that are holding the crosswind block to the axle shaft. Right now there's a few folks out there saying, you know what, simple is better, and you know what, it is. There's probably a reason why this reel has survived, and that's that it doesn't have a lot of moving parts. If the parts are well made and they're not a lot of moving parts, well, not a lot to break. Alright, those two screws have been noted. They're put into my my parts tray. I'm just looking for a little utility knife. I notice we have the old grease here. I think if I can scrape that off, it'll be easier to remove the axle shaft. That was pretty easy to remove anyway. Simply pull up on that, then pull off on your crosswind block. And notice on your main gear where that stud is, you have a brass collar that's on there. If you find a little ring that you don't know where it goes to, you've pulled off that collar from the stud on the main gear. We're going to grab just a fine steel wool and just buff the shaft here. You noticed me with that utility knife trying to get some of the old grease off there before we removed it, and that's why I just wanted to buff there. There's some hardened grease on the crosswind block exterior. That has no purpose whatsoever being there, so let's get it off. I suspect that was probably in storage where it leaked out there. You know, gravity continues to work. My guess is that this reel was in storage. Let's move it this way because that's where I see the puddle. I see a puddle of grease on the side case here. I see all of the grease up top here has gone to that side of the main gear, and I suspect that what I just wiped off was probably that side of the crosswind block as well. So when you get something like that, you want to make sure that you clean it all off. And this one says that this reel hasn't been working in a while, and it hasn't been working because, well, it's been in storage. All right. There's a big nut up top here. That's what size that is. Yep. We want to go to our deep sockets now. Find the right one. I keep them close at hand. You would think I'd be a little bit more organized with this. I'm not. They're all in a little pail here. And eventually I do find the right one. It doesn't make for good videos, but it does make it easy for me to find them. So you have to bear with me while I get to the right one by process of elimination. We're going to start taking this off by using, well, I was going to say using an counterclockwise manner, but I'm just noticing here that this has stamped in it open with the arrow going the other way. Well, that's not referring to how the bail opens, that's referring to how your rotor nut goes. So let's take that off. And then we should be able to pull up and out on the rotor. That was easy enough. And we have an inside that's kind of loaded with salt and grease and the like. Well, we're going to complete the repair of this reel, and then I think we're going to come back. I'm going to remove the bail wire, remove the trip mechanism, buff out or sand down the exterior, and do a repaint there. We'll see if time permits. When you're doing your reel services, you want to make sure you clean all of the pieces and parts. This one isn't dirty. This one is pitted, like much of the rest of the reels. That pitting is not going to get in the way of anything. It's a keyway for your spool, but if you can clean it up, that's good. Here's maybe an issue. We have 3 steel screws, which are a sign that the reel was less expensive. You would use stainless steel screws if it wasn't. And these may or may not come out. Well, the first one's coming out. I'm just going to test all 3 of them before I go to remove them. And as I feared, 2 out of the 3 work. Well, I'm not seeing an example here of the of this being a ball bearing reel, so let's just kind of work around that. You want to move your stud out of the way here. You should be able to pull this whole assembly through. There is a little washer here that's going to get in the way. Remember that. Take your picture, Note that the washer belongs on the bottom here. Well, that's all that we have there. So all that we were affected by here, luckily, is this is a bail trip mechanism, but it has no effect on the balance. These three pieces belong, one of these belongs underneath, these two belong on top, underneath the rotor. With that out, we can remove the main gear. Should be able to just push this through or pull it out. That's that collar I was referring to. I went to grab the main gear by that stud, pulled that collar off. That's okay, just remember it's there. Work it out. And now it's time to kind of do the cleaning. So we're going to put that collar right back on there so that we don't lose that. We'll grab our back end washer here, put that in. And we can kind of scrub up what we already saw here on the accumulation of the dirt and grease. I'm going to use some penetrating oil to kind of loosen that up. I just got that question the other day. They're working through a Mitchell reel that is full of grease that's been dried. How do I get it off? Well, I said if you kind of use the penetrating oil like I just did here, do a little bit of softening with it, then use the flat side of the screwdriver, that would be the shoulder side here. You can generally get most of the stuff out of the way. And then we have a little bit down below here. Now if you're in a hard to reach location, go ahead and shift from your paper towel or whatever to something like a cotton swab. That'll help you break it down further. If you're working on this reel and you've taken that dog out or somehow that dog launched, notice here that you have a clip that's holding the dog on. Underneath here there's a ring of a spring, and here's your little clip that holds the shoulder against it. When you go to do the override, you can get a better look. The tail of the spring rests along the case here, and this is how it's going to trap into the notch in the back end of the main gear. This is the back end of the main gear. You see the notches, and that's where your anti-reverse dog will set and stop your reel from going backwards when it's engaged. Well, if you have questions on this reel or any reel, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about it, if you know a little bit more about it, maybe I certainly don't know the history of the whole thing and the exact dating of it. If you want to leave that in your comment section, share with the forum, or just to make me smarter, I would appreciate that. If you have a question on this reel or any reel, maybe you're working on one and you're stuck, leave that question in the comment section. I will try and answer it. Generally, I try to answer questions the morning after the videos are posted. So if you leave something at 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night, don't expect a response until maybe 10 or 11 in the morning, but I do try to answer those. All right, we've cleaned out the back of the main gear. I'm going to take a hard brush. There's a beautiful piece of machined metal here, thinking it's brass. And we're checking the teeth and making sure that we have all of the grease and the like off of the bottom and into the cavities that intersect with the main gear. We do the same thing here. And all I've seen here is the puddling on the inner ring of this, but there's no grease at all inside any of these teeth. If there was, do the same thing. Get a hard brush and rake it out, and then just kind of mop up when you're done. And that gear is ready to be reinstalled. I'm going to take a artist's brush and some fishing reel grease. The fishing reel grease that I use is Penn Precision Reel Grease. We're going to get it onto the shaft first, and we're going to insert that into the case. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to get some grease onto the teeth. If you like, you could probably put the handle back on to give it some grip. You don't have to. And then we're going to put some on the face, because the cross line here is going to ride on the face. So we basically have lubricated 3 sides of that. I'm going to go to our parts tray now and pick up that washer that belongs on your pinion gear. That's this one. And in order to install this now, I'm going to do two things. We're going to put some grease onto the pinion gear side that's going to ride in that bushing up top. We're going to put it into the teeth of the pinion gear. That's going to intersect with your main gear. And now what we want to do is insert that. Well, to insert that, you can't clear the teeth of the main gear with this washer on the pinion gear. You have to put it underneath like that. And now you can come in from the top, grab it and pull it through, give it a turn, make sure it's turning, and that's how you set that gear. We're going to hold that gear now because we have two pieces that go on here. The first one is that Teflon washer. The second one is that silver washer that goes on top of that, just like that. And for the purposes of this video now, we're going to reinstall this bowl or the rotor, but when it comes, if I have a chance, I'm going to try and do a video on how to repaint a severely cosmetically challenged reel. All right, that's done. Go back to our rotor nut. Let's go ahead and do that. And I'm just thinking I can't get it started, and then I realized this was reverse threaded. So it's going to go on in a counterclockwise manner. For those of you that are in the digital world and haven't learned the basic clock function, turn the nut towards you. All right, maybe switch the throw on our ratchet. Tighten that down. Now you can spin it at this point. It should turn nice and easy, which it does. The only caution I would tell you in that is that you don't have your handle on yet, so there may be a little bit of play on this. Okay, we're going for the wing now. This is your crossline block. If you had any question about whether that crossline block belonged up or down, well, that's what you have pictures for. You did take pictures, right? And go ahead and put that back on. And I think I've got that upside down. Oops. I just want to go up top all the way. We'll see. Yep, I have that upside down. One way to check is if you don't have the clearances when you go up top on something that's not symmetrical, then you've got it the wrong way. I could have gone back to the pictures, didn't need to. I knew the alternate approach there, so sometimes folks don't do that. They just simply put the axle shaft back in, close the reel up, and then when they go to turn, they find it's jamming, and they try to force it, and well, all that work was for naught, because at the end of the day, what happened was the whole thing gets jammed up there. All right, I'm going to roll this so that I get it to the down position. And I can bring the axle shaft through, just a light coat of grease on it. And we can go ahead and put that back in. Insert it through the crossline block. And you want to take these two holes now in the axle shaft, and you want to align them with the two holes in the crossline block. Just like that. Once those two holes are aligned, let's go ahead and put the tie-down screw back in. And we'll see that this is a relatively easy reel to work on because there's no bearings. It's a simple reel that'll last a long time. It's still a very smooth reel. I would say that the chipped paint and the corrosion on that paint is a matter of just not being rinsed off after use. And when it went into storage, I'm sure the salt just ate right through that. And that's the cause of your issue here. Okay, we have a little flow here. You'll notice this moves back and forth, but you're also going to notice that there's two rungs on the side plate, and that's actually going to hold true in operation. So I'm just going to wipe that little bit of grease off that's on the side plate here. All right, go ahead and just put a little bit of grease on these two raised pieces here. That's going to hold your wings. And you can turn this around and put that back on. Go to your parts tray and get the 3 pieces. The screws are going to hold the side plate together. And we'll go ahead and tighten those down. Now if it was a 4 setup, I would alternate the way that I'm putting these on. In 3, it doesn't matter which one you start with and which one you finish with. You're going to have spread the torsion or the tension of the compression of the side plate equally. So just be careful when you're putting them in. I'd also normally clean this case up, but again, I think I'm going to do something with this in terms of painting that bowl. And the last thing you want to do is put a lot of greases and oils on there, so causing it that the paint will not adhere. That's the bottom end, other than the handle. We can put a little bit of oil onto the handle. That'll stop any corrosion that's coming along. I want to make sure that you thread this properly. I'm noticing that the handle button making a little noise, so we'll use some of that penetrating oil over here. That's dried salts as well, I'm sure. And then we'll come over, show you the spool service. There's a clip ring in here. You want to just grab a pick or a small screwdriver or something, work behind one of those indentations, put that into your parts tray, because, well, if you don't, you can lose that pretty easily. Looks like these are probably felt washers. I'm going to use that pick to bring these out. We talked about this earlier, all of that stuff that's been splashed on here by retrieving the line, well, that's just found a home in that cavity. So, like everything else in this reel, we want to take our time, go ahead and clean out that cavity as best you can, and make sure that it's clear so that when you go to use the drag washers, we have 2 more in here, now we're at the bottom, that they hold well. Well, these drag washers appear to be felt, nice thick pieces of felt, but they are felt nonetheless. If you feel any grittiness on them, just kind of wipe them down. And felt washers get oiled. You want to kind of keep them saturated. Let's get there should be 3 pieces here. This should be a 3. Well, there's 2, so we kind of have a basic. We have a felt washer underneath here. There you go. That was 1 more. I'm trying to think how you get a 6 drag setup with 5 drags. All right, they're so dirty, or they're so discolored that it was hard to see the last one. Black on black is not a good idea to me. All right, put that in. Get your fishing reel oil and saturate the washer. That's going to keep it from drying out and tearing. That's your biggest issue with the felt washers. If you have felt washers in your reel and you find that they're tearing up, then one of the best things you can do is to replace them. The replacements are generally available in Carbon-Tex or some other, I was going to say leather, but I don't think you're going to find too many leather replacements any longer. I'm using steel wool to get rid of the pitting. If that pitting was really severe or if it was raised, go ahead and find a microfile. We'll just do this as an example. Run your microfile across the top to knock off the pitting. If you don't do that, well, you're going to let that pit tear up the washer. There's 2 round washers. They're called keyed washers. That's these. One goes top and one goes bottom. These are pure steel. That's why they're pitted and rusted. They are buffing up okay. You can't feel it, but I feel that there's no resurfaces on these as I'm doing this. All right, so we put the first of those in. You're going to take the first of your keyed washers and place that in. We're going to take our second fabric washer now. I'm going to put that in. Same thing, flood it up. Now you want the eared washer. That's the one with the 2 prongs sticking out the side. And we want 1 more of the fabrics. This is, like I'm saying felt, this may actually be leather. That last one actually felt leathery. So I'll go with either. It doesn't matter much in terms of the service. You got to keep those both fresh. Let's go ahead and take the spring clip, load that into the groove, hold it with your finger because it's easy to shoot these clips, compress them, and seat them into the spool. And that's it. So the only other thing I'm going to do here, again, in the thought of possibly repainting, is I'm going to remove the line. You should remove the line at least once a year if it's monofilament. Monofilament is subject to stretch. It's also subject to UV damage. And there's no sense, monofilament is relatively inexpensive. There's no sense trying to get the extra year out of it. Doesn't matter if you're fishing the reel every week or if you're fishing that reel 10 times a season. Go ahead and do yourself a favor so that you don't lose the fish of a lifetime. Replace that monofilament. Alright, just going to reinstall the adjuster. Once you've got it tightened, back it off. If you don't back it off, it's going to act as a vise, and we're going to find the same thing we just did with this a year down the road here. They'll be pressed in, stuck to the metals, and ineffective as a drag washer. I'm just going to clip that off for a moment. One of the things we did not do, this bail was working when we tested it, so all you want to do here is just put some oil in there. And again, I just made a mistake there and actually put it in there, and it's going to leak on the side plate, I'm sure. And that may cause me an issue with painting it. But let's go ahead and set that. It flows nice and easily. Let's give it a test drive here. Boy, that works nice. Let's put the anti-reverse back on. Nice loud clicker. You know what? This is a nice reel. The intended target is bluefish and striped bass here along the mid-Atlantic seaboard. I think he's got a winner there. The only thing that we got here in this reel, it's not going to win any beauty contests, and we'll see if we can't kind of solve some of that as well. The only thing I would recommend doing beyond that, these have got rough edges on them, and as this line is going to spool out when you're casting, you can see it's going to catch, or it has the potential to catch that rough edge. So I think what you would want to do, even if you don't wind up doing the repaint, just kind of scrape that down to minimize the ridge there, or the burr, so that you don't ruin your reel's line. So that's it. That's the Sportfisher 6100, and that's how you take it apart, service it, and make sure it's ready to go fishing again. To all of our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. It really is appreciated, particularly during this just ongoing, never-ending pandemic. And to everybody, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.